Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast, and welcome back for another end of month podcast with our editorial team. So I am Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and I'm joined by
Lois Vallely, Chief Reporter.
Maria Nichols, Features Editor.
Yeah, my name is Mohamed Musatoue, Senior Reporter.
And I'm Daz McQuaid, Investment Reporter.
Okay, awesome. So May has wrapped up quite nicely. We had quite a busy May with Money Marketing Interactive Leads, which went very well. And we're looking forward to Money Marketing Interactive London. So everyone look out for registration for that coming soon. But I want to get more into what you guys covered during this month. So Lois, you covered our feature, the cover feature for the May issue. So do you want to get a little bit more in depth on that?
Yes, but before I do, I want to mention that much more importantly than our event, it was also my birthday in May.
That is true. Yeah.
Well, actually, May was my birthday. So
the whole of May.
The whole of May.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's over now. So anyway, my cover feature was on big tech. So companies like Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. Technically, they're big data companies, but everyone sort of wraps them up as big tech companies. Mm-hmm. And what sort of effect they might have if they make a big play in financial services. Specifically, I was looking at whether they were going to sort of look into financial advice. Mm-hmm. The conclusion was very unlikely that they're going to offer sort of face-to-face financial advice ever. So advisors who do financial planning, that they're probably not going to impinge on that space, but they can do a lot in financial services that might shake up the sector a bit. And what I found most interesting was actually some of the stuff that financial services companies can learn from big tech companies. So I started off the feature. Well, I sort of did it. I did a monster theme, like a horror theme, because I love horror films.
Yeah.
And if you've seen the cover, it's one of the best things I've ever been involved in. Yeah. And that's not sad because it was really good. Yeah. And so I sort of started off, I suppose I was making the comparison with big tech companies being sort of monsters lurking in the shadows. But it's actually, certainly in the shorter term, they're not really something to fear because they probably aren't going to make a massive play in the next couple of years. Although, they may in the future. So they are something to look out for and be aware of. But it's more what financial services companies can learn from them. Like they're really good at marketing. They're really good at customer data. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of things, which I'm not going to go into now because you can go and read the feature and look at the cover and admire it. Yeah. But no, it was a really interesting feature to write. I really enjoyed it. Not least because I got to write about horror films.
It was a great read. I liked the kind of weaving in and making it seem like it was some horror theme. Because I think when it comes to tech, people get quite fearful and a bit like dystopian about it. But I don't know why that is. It just there's another thing, and that's that these big tech companies are making big investments in AI, artificial intelligence, right? Which could be something to fear, who knows? But in the short term, at least, it can definitely help take some of the heavy lifting out of the financial advice process. And I think some advice firms are using it already. Things like ChatGPT to write suitability reports, sort of cutting out on some of the admin tasks that they don't necessarily need to be doing because it can just be done by a machine. That is true. Yeah. But I recently heard something. It wasn't to do with financial advice, but it was to do with law and how this lawyer had basically used ChatGPT to defending someone in quite a plain case, but he asked ChatGPT to basically write something that he would submit to the judge, and ChatGPT basically just made up prior case law, like other cases that have happened, but they weren't real. So then the judge was like, I'm throwing this out of court.
He didn't check it. I mean, you have to check.
He didn't check over it. And
ridiculous.
he said the proof that he submitted was him writing to ChatGPT and asking, is this
actual case law, has this happened in the past? And ChatGPT was like, yes.
Oh.
in my fairy tale land, it has. So as much as it is useful, do double check. It is not foolproof.
Yes,
sure.
Do not take it as gospel. Definitely not.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day, and he said he knows a software engineer who's got sort of quite software engineering traits, not necessarily the most
social,
personable. Well, I don't know, that's a bit unfair, but and it's a massive generalization, but yes, not necessarily that sociable. And he was using ChatGPT to make himself sound more human when he had to have difficult conversations with colleagues at work.
That is so funny.
Yeah, like completely the opposite of what you'd expect. But
I can imagine it might be useful for like neurospicy people, right? Because they're able to use it to carry on conversations in a way that other people would perceive as quote unquote normal. So it might be helpful in those.
Definitely.
Things.
One more thing I'll come off AI in a minute, but one more thing was my argument is often, well, ChatGPT isn't very creative, so I don't feel under threat because my writing is way better. Someone pointed out to me that you can just program it so it writes in your style.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
Yeah,
okay.
if you feed it enough of examples of your style, it'll be able to emulate you, which is also terrifying. But again, as human beings, we change and evolve so quickly that I don't think it would be able to keep up with your style as it evolves throughout the years. So don't worry.
Okay. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway. Is there anything else in May that you wanted to talk about?
Actually, yes, because I attended a completely different topic. I attended a really good event held by the Institute for Financial Wellbeing towards the end of May. And one thing I found particularly interesting was a couple of the speakers were talking about, so Thomas Mather from Aegon has done some research. He's I think he's a behavioral psychologist or something. I don't know if that's his exact job title, but something around behavioral stuff, behavioral science. And he was talking about the fact that people find it inherently difficult to save because they are disconnected from their future selves.
Yeah.
i.e., when you think about yourself, a different part of the brain lights up, for want of a better term, than if you think about a stranger. And the part of the brain that lights up when you think about your future, so yourself in the future, is the same part of the brain that lights up if you think about a stranger. So Chris Budd, I think I said that right. Chris Budd, who's like a financial wellbeing guru and works for numerous firms.
Money marketing columnist.
Yes, and a money marketing columnist. He said that if you're asking people to save, to put away money for their future self, you're basically asking them to give money to a stranger. So it's very difficult to, I think it's true of most people. Naturally, you don't think of your future self as yourself. So it's really interesting. I love the psychology stuff. My alternative career path was going to be criminal psychologist. So a bit different from financial well-being or financial psychology. But
in the heyday of CSI, I was going to be a forensic scientist. But that, because of CSI, that field was very oversaturated at that point. So
I looked at degrees there, and I was like, I'll go with English literature.
Yeah. No, but I think that is so interesting thinking about it. And I have always had a difficult time kind of thinking about my future self, not just when it comes to saving money, but like doing stuff for myself that I know is good. For example, should I lie in bed after work, or should I take a 20-minute walk because it's good for my health? I don't care about like Kim when she's 40 and like dealing with like other health situations that might have been helped if I just did a simple 20-minute walk every single day.
I know. So I'm very much live in the moment. I mean, it's good in some ways, but I think there's a balance. Some people are too focused on their future. I was talking to my mum about it the other day. She was like, it is a balance though, because if you're too focused on your current self, you're not going to be saving money, for example, for your future. But also if you're thinking too much about the future and just putting all your money into that, then you're not enjoying the present. So it's definitely a balance. But
it's a real balancing act. Maybe they should just give us all free therapy and financial education.
Yeah, I think that's a whole other can of worms that we're maybe not going to open right now.
Okay, great. So what about you, Darius? What did you cover in May that stood out for you?
One interview I had with let me just get his name right. Sorry, with Dominic Scriven, who's chairperson of Dragon Capital, and Dominic's got an OBE as well, and they're a fund manager in Vietnam. Yeah, and it was just sort of interesting how he said we can bring Vietnam to the UK by independent financial advisors. It's just basically, I just found it quite interesting talking to, because he's trying to get in contact with UK RFA market and Hargreaves Lansdown advisors in particular to try to extend his reach as a market to the UK. He's just sort of explaining how Vietnam is currently, it's not an emerging market, it's a frontier market, and that's like the stage before EM. And he says because that advisor sort of immediately put it in their funds in a high risk category. So he says in order for sort of to engage and get advisors to sort of trust them more, Vietnam needs to hit that sort of EM sort of status, that level. And so that's what they're sort of going for. And also one thing I thought I'm quite interested in is that they actually started to try to communicate or go in contact with advisors after RDR was implemented in the UK. So he said for Dragon Capital, they didn't really have much of RDR didn't actually have much of an impact, because once their sort of access to UK had already been implemented, so they, the rules have always been there, so they'd never really experienced like before and after. So it's a sort of it's a sort of everyday life for him sort of thing. I thought that was quite interesting how they plan to bring these Vietnamese funds for the UK via RFAs and so forth. But I just found it interesting, and also I did my dissertation on the Vietnam War at a university, so I've always found Vietnam quite an interesting country history-wise anyway. So that probably played a part in it why I picked on this particular story. But I just thought it was quite interesting how these things go into a fund manager.
Yeah, I find it interesting that like a lot more, I think we're seeing a lot more countries being added to different funds. People are kind of looking elsewhere, not going for the typical funds to invest in, which I think I'd never thought about Vietnam or Southeast Asia, really. Same with like other parts of the world, Africa or South America. But I'm sure there's like so much potential in all of those regions that we're just not tapping into quite yet. And you probably want to be at, like you're saying, frontier. You want to be in a new frontier. It sounds exciting and cool. But is there anything else that you covered in May that stood out for you?
I would say one topic that seems to be coming up a lot is ESG. And I would say when I went to Timeline's Advisor 3.0 Change and Agent Conference this month, one of the talks I listened to was sort of revolved around ESG. And I've heard before, enough times before now, people think ESG is like a very broad sort of acronym to use for the industry, like because so much sort of falls underneath it, it's hard to sort of pin it down. But Net Purpose Chief Executive and Founder Samantha Duncan, she said that the vast majority of consumers think at least that one aspect of ESG is important. And so she said around 94% of consumers believe one part is worthwhile. And then she also just used things just to clear some things up about ESG, that ESG actually sort of measures financial risk and not really sustainability. And it's only about past year that people have really started to realise that. But yeah, I've definitely found ESG reporting quite interesting so far. Yeah, there's a lot to it.
I'm sure isn't it quite hard now to find a fund that doesn't have some level of ESG, especially if you take into consideration the G, which is governance. Yeah. What company is going to say, oh no, we don't have good governance?
It's just a free for all out here.
So yeah, it's quite interesting. If an advisor asks their clients, do you want ESG? And they say no, I imagine it's actually quite hard to find a fund that doesn't have any ESG considerations.
So true.
Mm.
So what about you, Maria? What stood out for you in May?
We're talking about big topics. I know ESG is something that keeps coming up, but there's two things that everyone wants to talk about at the moment. Consumer duty, obviously. But
we're getting close.
We're getting close, but I'm not going to talk about it today because I feel like are we a bit bored of it? Should I say that? I don't know.
Maria, that's not very consumer duty of you. There's a meme going around on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
That's Peep Show.
Yeah.
I think he says that wasn't very Christmassy of you or something. And they've changed it to consumer duty. That wasn't very consumer duty of you.
I'm sorry to
I think so many people have been talking about it that now everyone's like, you get it, right? You have to have it. Right?
Yeah.
But I think we still see reports that's like 80% of people are not prepared. And it's like,
yeah, I know.
Wow. We are in June now. Come on.
Just 1 month away.
Yeah.
The clock is ticking. I think the difficulty from my point of view is finding new angles, because
oh yeah, definitely.
There's a lot that's been said. So I'm not going to talk about consumer duty today, but I'm going to talk about ChatGPT, which I know we've touched on already, but I just think it's so fascinating, and we are actually getting some quite different angles from contributors. So it's a good topic, and a couple of pieces that I've pulled out from May. So first of all, Gillian Hepburn from Schroeder, she wrote a piece for us online, and she basically typed in to ChatGPT what its opinion on the value of advice was. And it was just quite a positive piece overall. She was really impressed by the answer and kind of the aspects that ChatGPT pulled out in terms of considerations and what makes advice valuable. So that's quite interesting from that side of things. And then in May's mag, we had Clive Waller, and his piece was a bit more scathing, should I say. Not necessarily about ChatGPT, but laying into advisors really that are kind of burying their head in the sands on this.
Okay.
And I get it. I'm such a technophobe, and I'll put my hands up and admit I'm useless with technology and all of this. I mean, we were saying earlier there's risks to journalism, and maybe I'm kind of burying my head in the sand as well. But I think
I think when you say that, I think what you mean is that you haven't found a way for it to work for you yet. So once it's introduced that way.
I used it to write an article the other day, just to find some research, because I think that's quite an interesting use for it in kind of like a Google capacity, and it will send you to places that you might not have thought about in terms of researching something. But what was interesting from that was that it sent me to some FCA research, but the date was wrong on it. So I checked it, but I think I read something that the information they use is like from 2 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, it's capped at 2021.
Right.
It is still technically learning, but it's stopped at 2021.
And then I think, is it Bard? The
Google one. Mm-hmm.
And that's a bit more up to date, isn't it? With the,
I think it might like troll the internet while you're asking for it. I mean, Google, it's Google.
Sounds about right. That kind of thing's interesting. But no, Clive Waller's piece is worth a read in the magazine. He's I thought it was quite interesting that he said there's evidence smaller firms are happy with their current profitability and cohort of boomer clients, and they neither wish nor need to change. And that was the kind of contingent that he was laying into, really, and just saying, wake up to this. He's always a good writer, Clive, so worth a look. And Alistair Cunningham, he did a piece for us as well on why he wouldn't be without ChatGPT. He's quite an early adopter of it. He's quite techy. So that was really interesting to read from an advisor point of view and how he uses it in day-to-day business.
Yeah.
That was the main topic for me. But then elsewhere of note in the mag, Ros Altman, former pensions minister, she wrote a really nice piece on when will women get the backing they deserve on pensions. So I thought that was a very important.
I think that was our second most read article of the month as well.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's so good. That's so good to know. That's really encouraging. That's nice. That's it for me, I think.
Yeah. I think we are still like feeling the, I don't know, repercussions, can I say, of, ChatGPT and what AI means and what it's going to mean for us moving forward and whether people should use it or not. But it's always like hit and miss, I think. But I think if you think about it as a tool, it's always important to think about it that way. And then when it comes to consumer duty, maybe you can use ChatGPT to help you with that if you're still scrambling to finish.
Exactly. I actually edited a really interesting piece today from Saracen and Partners. I think that's due to go live next week, just talking about how AI is going to transform the world beyond kind of, the obvious points that we're talking about here, and how it could be of really amazing use in things like healthcare and education and things like that. So it's scary, and I think if you think about it too long, it all gets a little bit freaky. But at the same time, there's just, like I say, more and more new, nice, interesting angles coming out of this. So it's a really good topic. I'm enjoying that one.
Yeah. And Mamadou, what about you? What did you cover in May?
I covered so many stories, but I think the one that stood out for me was the Aberdeen advisor OS launch. They announced last week that they're planning to bring all their platform proposition, into one proposition, just to make the process easier for advisors. I think they've been facing kind of like complaints from advisors that the service is poor, and then with all these platforms, it's complicated and kind of like making the life of advisors very difficult. So it seems, they have listened and then taking that, on board. So now they're planning to bring all the platforms under one platform proposition called Advisor OS.
Okay.
So I thought that was a very good, good story, very timely, and the comment section, kind of like was saying something similar, at long last, everybody has listened, to advisors, to finally allow or do the right thing, So, so I think, that was one story. And then the other story was, the Vanguard, I think we discussed Vanguard in the last, podcast,
Yeah, we did.
Yes, and I did the cover, So we went to the Timeline conference, and the Vanguard boss was there. Sean Haggerty, and he was giving kind of like an explanation why that proposition, failed. So I thought, I thought that was interesting, and basically the point he was saying, was that those who are on the advice gap, there's not kind of like a one size fits all,
right?
Because they all have different needs and kind of wants, So that's something they would take on board, for next time he bring the company into the space, So I thought, that was interesting.
But I think it's amazing that he took it head on and actually addressed it rather than just being like, we put out a statement. Okay.
Exactly.
That's the explanation, but actually giving a full-on explanation and being like, look, we've learned from our mistakes, and we hope that if we were to attempt it again, we can, put something better in place that isn't just a one size fits all kind of system.
Exactly. And that's the point you said, it was like, they came into the sector thinking that, they have the best idea, they can just solve, this issue, so, just put it out there,
Yeah.
But then it feels spectacular, so now they said, okay, we have to learn, and they're passing on that information to, the FCA, starting to kind of like discuss finding ways to deal with the advice gap, because I think that's an issue. That should be addressed. There are many people who are kind of like missing out on life-changing advice. Because I think the stat is like 9% of the population, have access to regulated advice. So a large chunk of the population are kind of like missing on advice.
Just walking around like headless chickens.
Exactly. People don't know about pension, don't know how to manage their money and stuff like that, So
yeah, I always think about like if I hadn't worked parallel to financial services and knew about pensions and knew about insurance and different types of protection, I don't know whether people who are within my ecosystem would then in turn know anything about it. Because I don't think they have like financial advisors within their ecosystem. So I think if you don't have anyone around you who might push you in that direction to pay attention to those subjects, you just aren't aware and you don't care.
And then there's like known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns.
Exactly.
So there's probably a group of people who don't necessarily have access to financial advice, but they want it. But there's probably a much larger group of people who don't even consider looking for it. And so
because as you said, Louis, they have no idea, They have no idea, There's something called, the FCA, there's a financial advice. People just have basic knowledge, about the bank, pension. That's it. If you start talking about SIP and start talking about, going into detail, they'll be like, what's that,
Yeah.
It sounds like a foreign language.
It's kind of interesting because I had a conversation with the head of communications at the FSCES, and she was kind of saying that people aren't aware of them until they're in crisis. And I was kind of questioning whether, that was a good model or not. But I guess you don't need to be aware of them until you require their assistance, because they are... If you were to have a situation where like your bank collapsed or something and then you wanted to claim compensation for that, I think if you were to Google, how do I get my money back? I think the FSCS will probably come straight up for you in that situation. So I guess in that way it works. But when it comes to stuff like information about pensions, there's such a vast array of topics and areas that you need to know about. So that's kind of different. But yeah.
But people don't always need a hospital, but everyone knows a hospital's there.
Exactly.
That's true.
Exactly.
Maybe slightly more urgent, but then if someone loses all their money, maybe it's not. I don't know.
So maybe we also need to be targeting not just financial advisors and just talking to consumers as well. And being
maybe that's an idea. I'm sure Mike will be thrilled to hear that when he gets back.
We're now also going to be trying to get in front of people who need financial advisors.
We want to go D2C.
Yeah. Oh my God.
No, I think that's a good idea. There's a communication gap, between people and the sector, and I think, that gap, someone should try to, fill that gap, so that people are more aware.
Definitely. Okay, so now we're in June, and similar to Lois, June is a very special month. Well, similar in the way that May was a special month for you, Lois. June is a special month for me because it is my birthday month.
Yay!
That I also share
happy
with
birthday.
Mamadou's
Exactly.
Mamadou's son. So
exactly.
Happy birthday to him too.
And a special month for me too. And in month I kind of dread so much, because there's a very long list, very long shopping list.
Oh man, I'm so different. I literally now I'm just like, if you want to wash my car for me, or buy me my skincare, I'm happy with that. That is fine. That is all I need.
That's easy, Kim.
I know.
Mine is like PS5.
The older you get,
That's so pricey, you know?
Yeah, that's what you get for having a little boy. You know, they want the expensive toys. What can I say? But let's look at the June issue, which Momodi you wrote the cover feature for. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I did the cover feature for June, and it's about long COVID, you know, and the claim process, you know, I mean, with the sector. So basically, I was looking at, I mean, what is the sector doing for people who kind of like, are experiencing long COVID? Bad news, I think, you know, I mean, for people suffering from long COVID, you know, because I mean, it's very difficult to make a claim for long COVID.
Is it because people can't necessarily prove that it is long COVID, or it's any other element?
No. I mean, if you have an IP, I mean, it's easy, you know, if you have an IP, which is income protection. I mean, that's easy because, I mean, without policy, if you don't work, then they'll pay, you know.
Right.
But the challenge is for people with critical illness policy.
Right.
You know, so that's the biggest challenge for them. I mean, for them to prove that, you know, because there's something called TPD, which is total permanent disability. You know?
Right.
And I said long.
You don't know how long this COVID is going to last for.
Exactly. And then the area, I mean, it's still new, it's still great, you know, and there's still not one definition. I mean, for COVID, you know.
So it's not necessarily defined as a critical illness then.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But then for you, I mean, as a claimant, you have to prove that you are permanently disabled, you know? And that's very difficult to prove, you know, because I mean, the doctors are still kind of like dealing with this issue, and with the sufferers, I mean, they all don't have the same symptoms. You know, so I think that's the challenge also, you know, kind of like it's very difficult to say, oh, this is long COVID, because people, I mean, present themselves with different symptoms, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's the general one, kind of like you're tired. I mean, you struggle to, breathe and all the stuff, you know. But I mean, some other people have much worse, you know. So I spoke to someone, you know, called Nicola Mitchell. You know, I mean, she was the source. I mean, for the stories. I mean, she put a claim. To Aviva. But the claim was declined, you know, because I mean, as far as Aviva concerned, she couldn't provide any medical evidence. To show that she's permanently disabled, even though she had terrible illness. I mean, she had poor eyesight. I mean, she struggled to breathe. She had problems with her kidney, you know, her lungs, you know, so many problems. But I mean, as people say, and then the other thing also, I mean, she used to be a journalist, you know. So I mean, according to Aviva, I mean, because she's very vocal online, you know, she writes so much stuff online.
Right.
So they're saying, I mean,
you can still make money.
Exactly. I mean, you can still do your job, you know. So as far as they're concerned, she's not totally permanently disabled, you know. So
is that in case, like, because she might get better, she might make a full recovery. Yeah. They just don't know. Is that what they're saying?
Exactly.
Okay. So but is that not the same with? Sorry, I was just going to say, is that not the same with like some types of cancer? So you don't know whether you're going to go into remission or not.
No, but cancer is different, you know. I think cancer is different with this. I mean, with this TPD. I mean, like for cancer, they have data, you know. I mean, cancer has been around for a very long time, you know. And for them,
this is just
COVID is like 3 years,
of a lack of data that they're not willing to.
Kind of like a hard scientific evidence to show that, you know, this, when you have this, long COVID, I mean, but it's a permanent, you know. I mean, and that's the word permanent.
But why can't they compare it to other respiratory diseases?
Why can't they?
I'm sorry. I look at me interrogating you as if you're Aviva.
I think that sounds good, but I mean, for the insurers, I mean, they just want the easy route out, you know. I mean, they have this thing, you know. I mean, it's like we're gonna prove. I mean, this is permanent. Then that's it. You know? So,
I don't know if I can say like anyone's the bad guy in this situation, because it is, like you're saying, it's a relatively new thing. It does feel like it's kind of scummy that this poor woman is suffering. yeah, she is a journalist and she can work online, but if you're experiencing a flare up on a certain day, that means you might not be able to make a deadline, and then you don't get that money. Then what? You'd have no fallback plan.
Indeed. So yeah, I mean, that was a very sad story. And I spoke to, people in this sector. Spoke to doctors also. But I think, that's a challenge. So they're still working on, getting this data. Hard data. So I think, they said the next maybe 10, 15 years, they're going to have more data. So
10, 15.
I know, poor woman. So
I feel like in 15 years there will have been another pandemic with some other thing, and we'll be back to square one doing this all over again. But anyway,
yeah, that's a very good point you raise. And that's what I also ask the sector. Kind of like, are they ready? For the next pandemic? In terms of letting people out of stuff. So yeah, but you want to find out. In the June magazine, it's all covered.
Jeez. Well, something to look out for, I guess, and something to keep following to see if there's any change within the insurance sector when it comes to covering patients with long COVID. Because I know, like with like US medical insurance, they also are finding it difficult to cover people who say that they have long COVID, because to them, they're like, we don't really know if it's a thing. Exactly. Some people recover pretty quickly, and some people just don't. So when it comes to like covering their medical bills even, which is something thankfully we don't have to think about in this country, but in America, they do have to think about that. Some people can't even get those medical bills covered by their insurance, which, it's scary.
I think there's a state welfare element here as well. What does it mean for our welfare system in this country? Because I assume so she can claim on benefits, right? Is she claim on PIP? On the disability?
On PIP, yeah.
Obviously it's not the same. It doesn't touch the sides, I imagine. But in these years to come, how much more is the state going to have to pay out for?
Exactly, and that's a good point. That's a good point also. You guys, Maria, because she said, as part of the PIP, assessment, she was kind of like, check whether, she can go back to work, and then the medical, team of the PIP, said her condition is permanent. So she was declared disabled and permanently, unfit for work. But I think the insurance have a different criteria, from the PIP. So
there's that misalignment. Yeah,
exactly.
It's horrible, isn't it? It's not fair.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think I will be interested to read that and probably look into seeing, what improvements, and hopefully there are improvements and some compromises made for people who suffer from long COVID. What about you, Maria? What is there to look out for in June? What columnists do we have coming up?
Well, I wrote a column this month.
Yay!
I wrote a column about sales pressure in the industry, and it was following on from one of the financial advisor to be diary entries that we had from a aspiring advisor, saying, well, basically she said that she was quitting becoming an advisor. One of the main reasons being she felt this big sales pressure, and that just really shocked me because, I don't know, call me naive. I just thought that was a thing of the past. Delved slightly more into it, and basically the conclusion was we just can't let that kind of thing be putting off new recruits, because obviously the industry desperately needs the new blood to survive. So just a little piece on that. And then Amanda, who's not here today, but she's done some really great pieces, really interesting little piece actually on team building and bonding post-pandemic, and how, your usual bonding experiences with your employees, chats around the water cooler and even just popping to the pub after work. It's just not really happening anymore. So there is some really practical tips in that. And also a really in-depth, really good piece on how lifelong renting can be made more compatible with retirement saving. So we see more people are finding themselves having to rent for longer. A lot of older people are ending up not owning their own homes. So there's a really big question there, big problem there that needs to be solved in the next few years. So yeah, take a look.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I like this sales thing. I think I could relate to that because I remember being a graduate and coming out of school, and like all of the graduate roles that were kind of advertised to me were sales roles. And I was just like, I know my personality. I'm not a salesperson. But if I had gone into something,
salesperson.
If someone tells me no, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I respect your boundaries. I'm not going to push. What about you, Lois? Are you a salesperson? No.
In a way.
You sell your articles. You do. But sell us your articles for June.
Well, you should definitely read My June MM Meets with Tracy Vegro, because it's probably the best thing you'll ever read in your life. No, but it is very good.
The May cover feature, obviously.
Yes. Well, yes. No, sorry. Anyway, I wrote the MM Meets for the June issue. It's a very good one with Tracy Vegro from CISI, the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment, which I thought was called CISI, which sounds very close to CSI.
If you say it quickly, you just get tripped up and you end up just saying CSI.
Yeah, but it's CISI. And she's interested. So she just celebrated 6 months as CEO when I interviewed her, which was back in, I think, what month are we in? Oh, I can't even remember when I did the interview, but I did it in the spring sometime. And so she said that by joining CISI, she'd sort of done the full gamut, as in she's worked in policy, she's worked in regulation, and now she's working for a professional body. So she's sort of got the whole, it wasn't always in pure financial services roles. Okay. She did the law regulator, I can't remember what it's called. But so she has some very interesting experience to bring to CISI. And she said her main thing was that she wants to, because I think it's become, she said it's sort of they're working to make it more relevant, and she wants to continue that work, so that she said young people, but just new advisors stay in the sector for life. So it was an interesting.
I saw that they've partnered up with Next Gen, kind of, I guess, in that vein to try and get that young blood.
Next Gen's got a lot of young blood connections.
Yeah. Makes it sound like some kind of gang.
Yeah, kind of does. It's like a rap group, Young Blood.
Yeah. What about you, Darius? What are you looking forward to coming out in June, or what did you cover for June?
Sorry. Mark and I covered MMI leads for the Meg. So it was nice as well. I was actually there, and I could see, reporting it for being an eyewitness to the entire event. So that was fun. There's a lot of interesting speakers throughout the day, and a lot of different topics covered. So that was definitely interesting. For me, one speaker who stood out, who ironically was the last speaker of the day, was Dr. Lisa Lovedale-Gormson, who's senior advisor of the FCA, and she had a lot to say. And just to sample, she's personally pursuing litigation against Meta, or formerly Facebook, but she did want to make clear that she's doing that, not the FCA. That's something that she's doing individually. I just thought she was a really interesting talk, and she spoke about sort of the explosion of AI and saying the amount of companies using AI is more than doubled. It's gone from around from 30% to 70%, and it's clearly a growing trend. And again, to sort of talk about big tech, she also said the FCA's role is not to regulate big tech models that don't really fall under its sort of regulation purview. So they are sort of separate to what the FCA is doing. But she'd say one point she said big tech firms are very good at taking advantage of the mass amount of data they have a control of, or they use. So I thought the whole day was interesting. But I would say she she definitely sort of stood out as an interesting speaker. But yeah, as I said, Michael and I was wrote about the entire day, which included a lot more people's opinions on different matters throughout the day. So yeah,
I do wonder though, her saying like we're not really we don't delve into big tech and we're not getting involved in regulating big tech because we don't see that being a thing right now. Shouldn't they be thinking about ways in which, like, being forward thinking in the same way that they didn't foresee like crypto scams and all of the things that are now happening that they have to try and after the fact retrospectively try and help and stop people and tell putting out ads telling people not to think that investment is gambling and all of that, or it's a game or whatever. I'm not criticizing them, but
because Amazon launched that home insurance comparison site.
Yeah.
What if they launched like their own insurance offering? Surely that would fall under the FCA's remit.
Yeah.
And they would need to regulate that.
I think it's always good to have an eye out for the possibility of big tech. Like she's personally suing Meta. Meta's going to keep putting its hands in lots of different pies that will make it money. And financial services, they haven't figured out how that will make them money yet, but I'm sure they're trying to find a way, whether that's buying another company or something. That
is one of the things that some people I spoke to, though, when I wrote my cover feature, just to bring it back to the beginning. One of the things they said was that big tech companies might be a bit put off, like coming fully into financial services because of how heavily regulated it is in the UK.
Right.
But then another point, which I think it was Ian McKenna made, was if they can sort of abide by all the regulations in the UK, they can probably do it anywhere in the world, because I think the UK is renowned for having very stringent regulations. So they might use the UK as a test bed. You never know.
Oh, we'll see. Watch this space. Maybe we just predicted something. But it was amazing talking to you guys again for this end of month podcast. And even though we were missing Amanda and Michael, who has flown off to Portugal, I was still not together. Amanda's doing her own thing with her family, and Michael is with his girlfriend. So two separate holidays that are happening right now. But I really enjoyed speaking to you all.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you, Kim.
That was good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.